They weren't just stealing her books, priceless first editions, her life's work, collections that whispered history from every page. They were poisoning her, slowly, deliberately, making her think she was losing her mind, dissolving her reality from the inside out, her own flesh and blood, the son of the sister she adored, and his scheming girlfriend, living under her roof, smiling to her face, pouring her tea. Imagine that, the intimacy of the betrayal, the sheer audacity, the chilling cruelty. It takes your breath away, doesn't it? Leaves that cold knot in your stomach. I'm Victoria, and you found the place where we talk about the unthinkable, the stories that lurk in the shadows of ordinary life, the stories that chill you, the ones that make your skin crawl, but also, sometimes, ignite something fierce inside, stories of crossing lines, deep dark lines, and the consequences that inevitably follow. Today's story, it's one I haven't been able to shake. It burrowed under my skin the moment I heard it, shared with me by a woman. Let's call her Clara. She reached out, hesitant at first, but determined, needing her truth heard. When I first met her, she seemed like the quintessential retired senior librarian, quiet, meticulously organized, perhaps even a little frail in her movements, gentle eyes behind classic frames. But beneath that calm, bookish surface, oh, there was something else entirely. A core of steel forged in silence and betrayal, something they never counted on. Never even glimpsed. They thought they could erase her, mentally, financially, literally replace her legacy with cheap knockoffs, step into her life like it was theirs for the taking. They were wrong, so terribly, devastatingly wrong. You absolutely need to hear how Clara, this seemingly gentle soul, turned their own viciousness back on them, tenfold, meticulously, brilliantly. Stick around, subscribe right now if you haven't, you know the drill. Click that little bell icon. Because this is a masterclass in righteous fury, a lesson in underestimating the quiet ones. Clara asked me to share this, in her own words, as much as possible. She wants people to know, to be aware, that monsters don't always lurk in alleys. Sometimes they're sitting at your dinner table. So, let's step into her world, just as the carefully constructed nightmare began to unfold, piece by insidious piece. I'll let Clara tell you herself, from here. It started subtly, didn't it always? Like a creeping vine, barely noticeable until it's choking the life out of everything. My nephew, Michael, my late sister Catherine's boy. Catherine, we were so close. Losing her felt like losing a limb. Michael was the last piece of her I had left, or so I thought. He'd always been a bit adrift, charming when he wanted something. Oh, so charming, but lacking direction, substance, a restless energy about him. Never quite settling, never quite finishing anything. When he lost his apartment, again, the third time in 2 years, citing a landlord dispute, a sudden rent hike, always someone else's fault, he called me, voice thick with manufactured despair, spun a tale of woe, nowhere to go. I couldn't say no, could I? He was Catherine's son. He played on that bond, masterfully. He moved into my guest room, promising it was temporary. Just until he got back on his feet. A familiar refrain, my house, my sanctuary, built not just of bricks and mortar but of quiet routines and the comforting scent of old paper and binding glue, my books, my lifeblood. Then came Tiffany, his girlfriend, arrived a week later, ostensibly just for dinner, stayed the night, never really left. Sharp eyes that seemed to take inventory of everything. Expensive tastes I noted immediately. Dripping false sweetness like cheap perfume. She moved in too. Just for a little while, Aunt Clara, Michael soothed. It's easier for us both, helps us save up faster. Save up for what? I wondered even then. A flicker of unease, quickly extinguished. He was Catherine's son. My house suddenly wasn't mine anymore. Their presence filled it. Their noise, their smells. A cheap air freshener clashing with the lemon oil I used on the furniture. And my books. My collection, built over 50 painstaking years, starting with a dog-eared copy of Jane Eyre I bought with my first allowance, growing into first editions, signed copies, inscribed presentation copies, rarities I'd hunted down in dusty shops and auction houses across the globe, more than possessions. They were my soul, my history, my legacy. Each spine held a memory, a connection to the past. My past, they knew that. Of course they knew. Michael had grown up hearing stories about my treasures. Tiffany learned quickly, her eyes lingering on the locked glass cabinets. At first, it was just forgetfulness on my part, apparently, or so they insisted, gently, kindly misplacing my reading glasses, finding them in the refrigerator. How could I have done that? Forgetting appointments I swore I'd written down in my meticulous planner, dates vanishing from the page, or so it seemed, feeling foggy, unusually tired. A heavy lethargy that settled deep in my bones, especially in the afternoons. Michael was so helpful, always there. "Don't worry, Aunt Clara," he'd say, that smooth, reassuring voice he inherited from his father. "I must have forgotten to remind you, my fault, I'll handle it." He'd make the call, reschedule, take control. Tiffany would make me tea, always bringing it herself, usually mid-afternoon, when the fogginess felt worst. "Special blend," she'd chirp, a bright, brittle sound. "My grandmother's recipe, so good for your nerves, helps with relaxation." She'd watch me drink it, a little too intently. They started managing my mail, bringing it in, sorting it. "Just to save you the trip to the mailbox, Aunt Clara," Michael said. "Especially with your knee, paying my bills online, setting up automatic withdrawals. Easier for you," he explained. "Less to worry about, we can track everything." I was recovering from a minor knee surgery, arthroscopic, nothing major, but it left me less mobile, feeling vulnerable. Tired from the physical therapy, needing help with simple things. It seemed kind at the time, thoughtful even, them stepping up, taking care of their old aunt. Foolish, wasn't I? So utterly, blindly foolish, trusting the blood tie, ignoring the warning bells that faintly chimed in the back of my mind. Then the episodes got worse, more frequent, more pronounced. Confusion descended like a sudden mist. Moments where I couldn't recall the name of my next-door neighbor of 20 years, dates blurring into an indistinguishable smear, forgetting mid-sentence what I was talking about, feeling dizzy, lightheaded, spells of nausea that often followed Tiffany's special tea, a subtle metallic aftertaste I sometimes noticed, then dismissed. They'd exchange worried glances over my head, long theatrical sighs, concerned murmurs just loud enough for me to hear. "She seems to be slipping, doesn't she?" Tiffany would whisper to Michael, her voice laced with pity. "Maybe we should talk to Dr. Evans," Michael suggested one evening, his voice thick with false concern, placing a comforting hand on my arm, a touch that now makes my skin crawl to remember. "Just to see what he thinks. Maybe there's medication. Something to help." They insisted on driving me, sat in on the appointment, flanking me like concerned guardians, nodding gravely as I struggled to articulate the fog, the memory lapses, the dizziness. My words felt thick, clumsy, inadequate. Dr. Evans, bless his trusting, overworked heart, a good GP but not a specialist. He listened, took notes, suggested cognitive tests, spoke gently of age-related decline, mild cognitive impairment. Phrases that felt like a death sentence. They leaped on it. Michael practically vibrated with eagerness. Tiffany squeezed my hand sympathetically. Power of attorney, medical directives, suddenly became urgent topics. "Just a precaution, Aunt Clara," Michael explained smoothly, presenting the documents later that week, documents likely prepared well in advance, "so we can handle things if things get more difficult. Make sure your bills are paid. Manage your care properly. We only want what's best for you." I signed the papers, my hand trembling slightly, feeling shaky, confused, profoundly tired, and trusting, still trusting, because the alternative was too monstrous to contemplate. The fog was thicker now, heavier, a constant companion, muffling my thoughts, slowing my reactions, isolating me within my own mind. And the books, my beloved books, something felt off in my library, my sanctuary within a sanctuary, a subtle shift in the energy, the smell, the familiar scent of aged paper and leather seemed diluted, overlaid with something artificial, chemical. I'd run my hand along a familiar spine, a first edition Hemingway. The Old Man and the Sea, the blue cloth binding I knew so well. The texture wasn't quite right, the weight, minutely different, lighter. But I dismissed it. The fog, the cognitive decline. It must be me, my perception failing, my memory playing tricks. Just like Michael and Tiffany said, gently, Sadly, they were so careful, so meticulous, insidiously clever. One by one, month by month, my treasures vanished, replaced by sickeningly accurate replicas. Good ones, very good ones, commissioned, expensive fakes, created by a skilled forger, paid for, I later learned. With credit cards taken out in my name, high-interest cards, ruining my perfect credit score, a score I'd guarded meticulously for decades, my identity, stolen, piece by piece, my financial security, plundered, systematically dismantled, my mind deliberately clouded, poisoned, and my legacy, my beautiful, irreplaceable books, sold off, scattered to the digital winds. Peddled on auction sites and dark web forums by the very people sleeping soundly down the hall, eating my food, living under my roof. The house felt colder, despite the heating being turned up higher than I liked, emptier, despite their constant presence. Their low whispers stopped abruptly when I entered a room, their laptops snapped shut. Tiffany flaunted new clothes, designer labels I knew I couldn't afford, let alone her, expensive gadgets appeared. A top-of-the-line smartphone, noise-cancelling headphones she wore constantly. Michael leased a flashy new sports car, dark grey, obnoxious engine roar. Good news on the investment front, he would say vaguely if I questioned it, waving a dismissive hand. Some tech stocks finally paid off, lying through his perfect white teeth, lies built on the sale of my soul, my history. I felt trapped, a prisoner in my own home, isolated, adrift in the chemically induced fog. They subtly discouraged visitors, my old friends from the library, my book club members. Calls went unanswered, messages weren't passed on. Aunt Clara needs her rest, they'd say sweetly into the phone if a friend persisted. She's quite frail now, gets confused easily. It's better not to tire her out, painting a picture of my decline, solidifying their control, gaslighting, poisoning, theft, fraud, isolation, elder abuse in its most insidious form, a comprehensive campaign, executed with chilling precision, to dismantle me, piece by piece, financially, mentally, socially. Leaving just a confused old woman, easily managed, easily controlled, a husk while they lived lavishly off my life's work, my stolen legacy, despair. It was a physical weight, crushing my chest, making it hard to breathe. Some days it felt absolute, final. Was this it? Was this how my story ended? A foggy fade into nothingness. Robbed, forgotten, erased, rage flickered, weakly, somewhere deep beneath the chemically induced haze. A tiny ember in a damp cellar, but it felt useless, impotent, trapped behind the fog, unable to ignite. Then came the mistake. Their one, crucial, arrogant mistake, underestimating the librarian. It was a Tuesday afternoon, grey, drizzly, matching my mood. Tiffany was helping me dust the library, a task I once cherished, now delegated. She moved with a proprietary air that grated on my already frayed nerves. She picked up a volume, a supposedly rare first edition of Virginia Woolf's Orlando, Hogarth Press, 1928, orange cloth binding. One I knew intimately, down to the slight watermark shaped like a crescent moon on page 73, a unique identifier. This copy, it felt, slick, too perfect. The cloth texture was uniform, lacking the subtle variations of age. My fingers, despite the slight tremor they'd induced in me, traced the cover, the spine, opened it carefully. My librarian instincts, dulled but not dead, surfaced, and there it was, on the title page. A tiny discrepancy in the publisher's colophon, the small emblem used by Hogarth Press, a detail only a true bibliophile, or a meticulous rare book librarian, would ever notice or care about. The font, the serifs on the letters H and P, subtly wrong, a modern digital adaptation. Cleaner, sharper, not the slightly imperfect handset typeface of the original 1928 printing. A forgery, a definite, undeniable forgery. Placed right there on my shelf, masquerading as my treasure, my breath caught, a sharp, painful gasp. The fog in my mind seemed to thin, just for a moment, pierced by a sharp, searing ray of adrenaline, pure, undiluted. I looked, really looked, forcing my eyes to focus, at the shelf, at the other books within reach, the supposedly pristine Conrad, the flawless Faulkner. Suddenly, I saw it everywhere, the too bright gilding on the spines. The unnaturally uniform agging applied to the page edges, the subtle wrongness in the paper weight, the bindings too tight, too perfect, lacking the gentle give of time and handling, my collection, my soul, replaced, violated, hollowed out, my gaze shifted, sharp now, to Tiffany, humming nonchalantly, dusting a nearby shelf with a feather duster. A new diamond bracelet sparkled ostentatiously on her wrist, catching the dim light. A bracelet I distinctly remembered her admiring on a luxury website weeks ago, sighing dramatically about how she could never afford such a beautiful thing, how life was so unfair, and then she said it, the second mistake, careless, arrogant, born of supreme confidence in my supposed decline. Michael's thinking we should get these insured for a higher value, Clara, she chirped, running a finger along the fake wolf, considering their pristine condition. They're probably worth even more now, pristine condition. My originals had the patina of age, the subtle softening of corners, the occasional foxing, the invisible imprint of having been read, loved, handled. These were sterile, immaculate, fake, and insuring fakes for inflated values, insurance fraud, another layer to their scheme, and the tea, the ever-present, cloying tea she insisted I drink every single afternoon, the special blend for my nerves. A memory surfaced, unbidden, pushing through the lingering haze from my research days at the library. Decades ago, I'd helped a professor with a paper, a project on obscure Victorian-era poisons, specifically plant-based alkaloids derived from common garden plants, notoriously difficult to detect in standard toxicology screens, causing symptoms remarkably like dementia, confusion, memory loss, nausea, dizziness, cardiac irregularities, oleander. Belladonna, foxglove, something insidious, tasteless, odorless in small cumulative doses, building up slowly, mimicking natural decline. The pieces slammed together, not gently, but with the force of a physical blow, knocking the remaining fog clean out of my head. The fog wasn't age, it was poison, deliberately administered, day after day. The forgetfulness wasn't decline, it was induced, manufactured. The books weren't mine, they were fakes, clever decoys. My nephew, Catherine's son, and his greedy girlfriend, smiling, caring, poisoning, stealing, destroying everything I held dear. The despair didn't just evaporate, it combusted, into pure, undiluted, cold fury, a fury so intense, so clarifying, it burned away the last vestiges of the chemical fog, leaving behind a terrifying, crystalline clarity, a sharpness I hadn't felt in months. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had fundamentally, fatally underestimated me. They saw a frail old librarian, confused, declining, easily manipulated. They forgot about the librarian part, the research skills, the attention to detail, the patience, the precision, the ability to cross-reference, to connect disparate pieces of information, to see the pattern in the chaos they created, and they forgot that even the quietest soul, the most unassuming woman, can house a sleeping dragon. Especially when you try to burn down her hoard, my mind, suddenly sharp, laser-focused, began to work, not with panic, but with icy calculation. The game wasn't over, it had just begun, and I knew with chilling certainty I was going to win. Okay, deep breath everyone, are you feeling that? The shift, the ground tilting, that incredible moment when the victim realizes they're not going down without a fight, when the fog lifts and the fire ignites. Clara, that quiet, meticulous librarian, just had her entire world collapse, orchestrated by the two people she trusted most, living under her own roof, but that spark, that single, undeniable clue, that realization born from her own expertise. It changed everything, absolutely everything. This is where it gets intense, where the planning begins, and honestly, incredibly satisfying. If you're finding value in Clara's story, if you feel that fire of injustice burning alongside hers, hit that like button right now. Let us know you're here, you're listening, because her fight back, her meticulous, cold-blooded plan, it's something else. You won't want to miss how she orchestrates their downfall. All right, back to Clara. The dragon was awake, and it was hungry for justice. The first step was clarity, and proof, undeniable proof of the poisoning. I stopped drinking Tiffany's tea immediately. That very day, I claimed a sudden violent aversion to the taste, blamming my sensitive stomach, making a show of gagging slightly when she offered it the next afternoon. "Oh dear," she'd said, annoyance flickering briefly behind the mask of concern. "Maybe it's too strong now, I can make it weaker." "No, no," I insisted, waving it away weakly. "Just water for me, please, plain water." The fog began to lift, slowly, agonizingly, over the next few days, like emerging from a long, dark tunnel. Headaches hammered behind my eyes as the chemicals leached out, but my thoughts became clearer, sharper, confirming my terrifying suspicions with every passing hour. I needed proof, hard proof, something admissible, something that would stand up. My mind raced, librarian mode fully engaged, research, evidence, sources. Verification. I remembered Dr. Anil Sharma, a retired toxicologist, brilliant, meticulous man, consulted with him years ago on a research paper about historical forensic methods. We'd kept in touch sporadically. Christmas cards, occasional emails discussing new findings. He lived across town, still consulted occasionally, valued discretion above all else. I needed a hair sample. Tested outside the usual medical channels, away from Dr. Evans. Away from Michael and Tiffany's sphere of influence. They monitored my appointments, my calls. I couldn't risk using my regular doctor or lab, getting a sample without suspicion. Tricky. They watched me constantly now, their concern feigned but their observation real. A few days later I feigned a dizzy spell in the library, stumbling near a bookshelf as Michael rushed to help me. As he steadied me, I accidentally snagged a few strands of my hair on the sharp corner of a shelf. Making a small sound of pain, I palmed them quickly, discreetly, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. That evening, fabricating a story about an old friend, Martha, picking me up for a last-minute specialist appointment I'd supposedly forgotten about, an ophthalmologist across town, I managed to get out of the house alone for the first time in weeks. Michael offered to drive. Tiffany offered to come along. I insisted Martha was already on her way. Became slightly agitated to sell the lie. I met Anil in a quiet, anonymous cafe several blocks away from the bogus appointment location. Tucked away in a corner booth, the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant hung in the air. He listened patiently, his lined face growing grimmer, more concerned, with every detail I recounted, the symptoms, the timeline, the tea ritual, Tiffany's insistence, the sudden onset coinciding with their arrival. He took the small envelope containing the hair sample, handling it carefully. "You need a segmental analysis, Clara," he said, his voice low, serious. "Testing along the hair shaft can show exposure over time, potentially indicating when the poisoning began, and if the levels correspond to the lifting of your fog." He promised discretion, absolute secrecy, and urgency. "Clara," he said, meeting my gaze, his eyes full of concern, "if you're right. If the tests show what you suspect, this isn't just manipulation. This is attempted murder, slow, calculated." I nodded, the words hanging heavy in the air between us. The cold fury inside me solidified into icy resolve. Attempted murder, fraud, theft on a grand scale. They would pay for everything. Next, the books, the sickening forgeries lining my shelves, mocking me. I needed irrefutable proof of the fakes, proof that would convince police, prosecutors, a jury, and ideally, evidence pointing to where my precious originals had gone, how they were sold, by whom. Another contact surfaced from my professional past, Dr. Alistair Finch, a renowned rare book authenticator based in the city, brilliant, eccentric, famously meticulous. And he owed me a significant favour from decades past. I'd located an obscure, privately printed manuscript he'd been hunting for years, something crucial for his own research. He'd sworn he was forever in my debt. Time to call it in. I documented the discrepancies I'd found on the fake Orlando, photographed the incorrect colophon using a magnifying glass and my old, reliable digital camera, noted the wrong paper textures, the unnaturally perfect bindings, the lack of expected provenance marks on several other volumes, using a burner laptop, bought with cash I'd carefully hidden away years ago inside a hollowed-out copy of War and Peace, mad money, as my mother used to call it, tucked away for a rainy day I never thought would be this torrential. I set up a secure, anonymous email address at a public library terminal miles away. I contacted Alistair, cryptically at first, mentioning a sensitive authentication matter requiring utmost discretion, hinting at forgery impacting a significant private collection. Then, once he responded with cautious interest, I laid out the situation, the suspected replacements, the vulnerability, the need for secrecy. He was intrigued, then professionally offended, then personally outraged. An attack on rare books, replacing treasures with fakes, was a deep personal affront to him. A crime against history and scholarship. He agreed to help. Immediately, secretly, he proposed posing as an insurance appraiser, someone Michael and Tiffany might plausibly admit to the library, especially given Tiffany's recent comment about increasing the insurance value. Perfect. We arranged a time, a Thursday morning, when Michael and Tiffany had a regular errand run, usually involving shopping malls and long lunches, funded, no doubt, by my liquidated assets. Alistair arrived promptly, dressed in a slightly rumpled suit, carrying a worn briefcase, peering over spectacles, a masterful performance of a slightly bored bureaucratic appraiser. He worked quickly, expertly, his touch gentle on the bindings, his eyes missing nothing. He used a small handheld microscope, a fiber optic light, sniffed the paper, examined the bindings with a practiced eye, murmured technical terms under his breath. His verdict, delivered in a hushed whisper after examining only a dozen key volumes, was swift, devastating, and exactly what I needed. Fakes, Clara, he whispered, his face pale with suppressed anger. Exquisite fakes, commissioned work, I suspect, very high quality, but fakes nonetheless. Every single one I've examined so far. The weight is wrong. The paper composition postdates the printing, the binding techniques. He shook his head, disgusted. He meticulously documented everything, taking microscopic photos, collecting minute fiber samples, noting chemical signatures from artificial agging processes, compiling a detailed report listing the specific inconsistencies invisible to the untrained eye, but screamingly obvious to an expert. Proof, mounting, hard empirical proof. Now tracking the originals and uncovering the full extent of their financial treachery, my librarian skills went into overdrive. My quiet life of indexing and research had prepared me for this digital hunt. The burner laptop became my command center, set up in the dead of night in my bedroom, screen dimmed, keyboard clicks muffled by a towel, deep web searches, specialized rare book forums, monitoring online auction sites across multiple platforms. Using specific keywords, detailed descriptions only I would know, knotting unique inscriptions, provenance details I hadn't shared with anyone, especially not Michael or Tiffany. It took days, stretching into weeks. Sleepless nights fueled by black coffee brewed silently in my room with a small travel kettle, staring at the screen until my eyes burned, chasing digital ghosts, but I found them, traces, fragments, ghosts of my beloved collection. Scattered across the internet, a signed first edition sold through an anonymous account on a major auction platform, shipped to a buyer in Germany, a rare poetry chapbook listed on a niche forum, payment routed through a cryptocurrency exchange. One by one, I uncovered the sales, linked by payment trails, often routed through layers of shell accounts, but ultimately funded by new credit cards, personal loans, lines of credit, all taken out recently, all in my name. Using the power of attorney they'd coerced me into signing, the identity theft was far worse than I could have imagined. Debts were piling up, astronomical sums, my perfect financial legacy, meticulously built over a lifetime of careful saving and responsible management, utterly destroyed, my credit score, ruined, notifications of overdue payments, final demands, intercepted by Michael to save me the worry. I meticulously downloaded transaction records, saved screenshots, traced IP addresses associated with the seller accounts, cross-referenced shipping manifests obtained through discreet inquiries, used my research skills to peel back the layers of anonymity. They weren't just greedy, they were sloppy, arrogant, utterly convinced of my incapacitation, believing me too fogged, too gone, too technologically inept, to ever notice or investigate. They used easily traceable platforms for some sales. Recycled usernames across different sites, failed to adequately mask their IP addresses, left digital breadcrumbs everywhere for a determined librarian to follow. I compiled a dossier, growing thicker each day, filled with irrefutable evidence, bank statements showing Michael and Tiffany's lavish spending sprees, correlated precisely with the dates my rarest books were sold, loan applications signed with a shaky, unnatural forgery of my signature, IP logs placing their devices. Their phones, Tiffany's tablet, Michael's new laptop, logging into the fraudulent seller accounts from within my own house, my own Wi-Fi network, the sheer audacity. It was all there, a detailed, horrifying tapestry of their deceit, woven with threads of their own incompetence and arrogance. The final piece, the trap, setting the stage for their downfall. It needed to be dramatic, undeniable, inescapable, and public, at least semi-public. Witnessed, they thrived on secrecy, on my isolation. Their downfall had to happen in the light, shattering the facade they'd so carefully constructed. I contacted Anil. The toxicology report was back, delivered discreetly, hand to hand, positive for olandrin. A potent cardiac glycoside found in the oleander plant, consistent with my symptoms, the fogginess, the nausea, the dizziness. The segmental analysis showed cumulative exposure, increasing over months, then abruptly stopping around the time I refused the tea. Hard proof, attempted murder, documented, quantified. I contacted Alistair. His authentication report was ready, 40 pages, detailed, precise, utterly damning, photographic evidence. Expert analysis, proof of the forgeries, proof of the theft. I contacted Detective Miller, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in the Financial Crimes Unit. I'd assisted her years ago with historical research for a particularly complex cold case involving forged documents. We had a rapport, built on mutual respect for facts, for truth, for meticulous detail. I met her quietly, away from my home, laid out the basics: elder abuse, suspected poisoning. Massive fraud, identity theft, presented the key findings. The toxicology report summary, Alistair's authentication conclusions, requested her presence, discreetly, with backup, at a specific time, at my home, the stage, my home, specifically, my library, the scene of their crimes, the heart of my stolen legacy. The occasion, a carefully orchestrated family dinner, a supposed celebration of my improving health, my miraculous recovery. I invited them. Michael, Tiffany, forcing warmth into my voice over the phone, a voice that felt alien but necessary, telling them Dr. Evans was amazed at my sudden turnaround, that I wanted to thank them properly for all their care, their support during my difficult time. They bought it, hook, line and sinker. Smug satisfaction radiated off them through the phone line, believing their horrific plan had somehow worked despite the tea issue, perhaps thinking the damage was done. That I was still pliable, still oblivious to the larger picture, eager to cement their position as my loving caregivers. I also invited Dr. Evans, telling him I had some important clarifications regarding my recent health and cognitive state, wanting him to witness my progress firsthand and perhaps answer some questions. His presence was crucial, a medical professional witness, and I invited Mrs. Gable, my oldest friend. The formidable head of my former book club, a woman with a network that rivaled the city's best news outlets, a notorious gossip, but fiercely loyal to me. I asked her to bring 2 other long-standing members, pillars of the local community, witnesses, respected, credible. Their presence would amplify the impact, ensure the truth spread. The evening arrived. A tense, almost electric calm settled over the house, the calm before a devastating storm. I felt, strangely serene, the cold fury banked now, coals glowing hot, waiting for the right moment to roar into flame. I dressed carefully. A simple, elegant dress, makeup applied with a steady hand, no trace of the frail, confused woman I had been forced to impersonate. Michael and Tiffany arrived first, bearing a ridiculously large bouquet of cheap carnations, dripping false sentiment and saccharine smiles, Tiffany wearing the diamond bracelet, Michael smelling faintly of expensive cologne I didn't recognize. Dr. Evans arrived next, looking cautiously optimistic, pleased perhaps that his initial diagnosis might have been too pessimistic. Eager to see my improvement, Mrs. Gable and her two friends, Mrs. Peters and Mr. Henderson, arrived together, curious, concerned. Sensing something unusual in my invitation, their eyes sharp, missing nothing, we made small talk in the living room. Strained, brittle, Tiffany hovered, offering drinks, ostentatiously pouring expensive wine Michael had obviously purchased with my money. I requested water. Michael pontificated about how well he was managing my affairs, how smoothly everything was running, how my investments were stabilizing. Lies, all lies. He patted my hand. A gesture meant to look affectionate, making my skin crawl. Then, after a simple dessert, coffee served, I suggested we move to the library. I have something I wish to share, I said, my voice steady, clear, resonant in the suddenly quiet room, the fog, completely gone now, replaced by diamond-hard resolve, a clarity that felt almost supernatural. We gathered among the shelves lined with fakes. The scene of the crime, Michael and Tiffany looked slightly uneasy now. Sensing a shift in the atmosphere, the energy in the room had changed, but still encased in their bubble of arrogance, believing they were untouchable. Dr. Evans looked expectant, Mrs. Gable and her friends, deeply concerned, exchanging glances. I stood before my empty fireplace, the dossier, the reports, concealed nearby, took a deep breath, let the silence stretch for a beat. Michael, Tiffany, I began, my voice ringing with newfound strength. A strength that surprised even myself, cutting through the tension. I wanted to thank you, truly, sincerely, for showing me the absolute depths to which betrayal and greed can sink. Their smiles froze, vanished, replaced by masks of confusion, flickering panic in their eyes. You thought I was fadding, didn't you? I continued, locking eyes with them, pinning them with my gaze, letting them see the clarity, the fury. Confused, helpless, frail, an easy mark. Someone you could just erase. I held up a single sheet of paper, Anil Sharma's toxicology report, summary page, clear, concise, damning, but the fog wasn't age, was it, Tiffany? It wasn't cognitive decline, Dr. Evans. My gaze flicked to him briefly, then back to Tiffany. It was the Olendrin, a cardiotoxin, in the special tea you so kindly, so persistently prepared for me every single day. Tiffany went white as bleached bone. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. Michael started to stammer. Aunt Clara, what are you talking about? This is crazy. Attempted murder, I stated calmly, the words dropping like ice into the stunned silence. Slowly, deliberately, poisoning me to gain control of my assets, my life, Dr. Evans gasped audibly, stepping back as if physically struck. Mrs. Gable looked utterly horrified, her hand flying to her mouth. Her friends mirrored her shock. And the books, I swept my hand towards the packed shelves, the beautiful, worthless fakes. My legacy, my life's work, my soul. I produced Alistair Finch's bound report, laid it open on the nearby table. Replaced with these. I tapped the spine of the fake wolf with a contemptuous finger. Exquisite forgeries, paid for with my own stolen money, while you sold off my originals, my irreplaceable treasures, piece by piece, online. Alistair, bless his impeccable dramatic timing, stepped forward from the shadows near the library doorway, where he'd been waiting patiently, unseen until that moment. Indeed, he announced, his voice booming slightly in the enclosed space, commanding attention. I have examined these volumes extensively at Miss Vance's request. They are masterful fakes, expertly crafted, but fakes nonetheless. The authentic collection, valued conservatively in the high seven figures, has vanished. Replaced by these fraudulent copies. Michael lunged, not at me, but blindly towards the door, raw panic finally breaking through his facade, flight instinct kicking in, but the doorbell rang at that precise moment. Sharp, insistent, cutting through the charged atmosphere, all eyes turned. Detective Miller stood there, flanked by two uniformed officers, looking calm, professional, authoritative. Clara Vance, she asked formally. Though her eyes met mine with a flicker of grim understanding. We received a report, serious allegations concerning poisoning, fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. She stepped inside, her presence immediately commanding the space, taking in the scene with a practiced eye, the pale, terrified faces of Michael and Tiffany, the shocked expressions of the guests, the reports laid out on the table. Michael Vance, Tiffany Dubois. Miller's voice was pure steel, devoid of emotion. You are under arrest for suspicion of attempted murder, grand larceny, aggravated fraud, and identity theft. Chaos erupted. Tiffany started screaming, shrill denials, protesting her innocence, blaming Michael, dissolving into hysterical tears. Michael struggled briefly, sputtering incoherent denials, his arrogance finally shattering completely, revealing the terrified coward beneath. It was ugly, pathetic, their carefully constructed world imploding in real time. Exposed under the harsh glare of truth and the fluorescent lights, the officers were efficient, professional, moved quickly. They were cuffed, read their Miranda rights, the metallic click of the handcuffs echoing in the stunned silence of my library, led away, their faces masks of disbelief and sheer terror, dragged from my sanctuary, justice, arriving not with a quiet whisper, but with the decisive, satisfying clang of handcuffs and the slamming of a police car door. The aftermath was messy, complex, but ultimately cleansing, like lancing a deep infection, painful but necessary for healing. The police investigation was swift and thorough, my meticulously compiled dossier, the digital breadcrumbs I'd gathered, combined with Dr. Sharma's toxicology report and Dr. Finch's authentication findings, left no room for reasonable doubt. Their digital trails, their spending records, the testimony of the forger they'd hired. It all painted a damning, irrefutable picture of their calculated cruelty and greed. They faced a raft of serious felony charges. Attempted murder carried the most weight, but the counts of elder abuse, grand larceny involving assets over $1 million, identity theft, aggravated fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, added up to decades of potential prison time. Their trial was, mercifully brief. The evidence presented by the prosecution was overwhelming. Airtight. My testimony, delivered calmly and clearly, recounting the gaslighting, the poisoning, the discovery, held the courtroom rapt. Alastair and Anil provided expert testimony that shredded the defense's feeble attempts to portray it all as a misunderstanding. A mistake. The judge, a stern, experienced woman, visibly disgusted by the details of the case, particularly the poisoning and exploitation of trust, showed absolutely no leniency in her sentencing. Long prison sentences for both. Michael received slightly longer due to initiating the scheme, massive restitution orders they'd likely never fulfill in their lifetimes, public disgrace, their names and faces plastered across local news outlets, their reputations utterly destroyed, just as they had tried to obliterate mine. Dr. Evans apologized profusely, deeply embarrassed by his misdiagnosis, his unwitting role in their charade. He offered his testimony against them. I forgave him, eventually. He was negligent, perhaps too trusting, but not malicious. His error served as a harsh lesson for him. My friends rallied around me. Mrs. Gable, Mrs. Peters, Mr. Henderson, the entire book club. Their support was a balm, their collective outrage on my behalf, fierce. Mrs. Gable, true to form, ensured the entire sordid story circulated throughout the community, leaving no corner untouched by the truth. Destroying any shred of reputation or sympathy Michael or Tiffany might have desperately clung to. Recovering my stolen books proved much harder. Some were traced through international legal channels, recovered after lengthy, expensive battles with buyers, and others vanished into the shadowy world of private collections, lost forever, a permanent scar, empty spaces on my shelves that still ache, a constant reminder of the violation. My finances took almost 2 years to untangle, clearing my name, repairing my credit score. Battling the credit card companies and loan agencies over the fraudulent debts. It was a long, exhausting, infuriating process, requiring depositions, affidavits, endless paperwork, but I persevered, driven by that same cold fire, that refusal to let them win even in absentia. My house, slowly, began to feel like mine again, truly mine. I had it professionally cleansed, spiritually and literally, changed the locks immediately. installed a state-of-the-art security system with cameras, became warier, less trusting of surface appearances, more protective of my space, my solitude, but not broken, never broken, scarred, yes, changed undoubtedly, but not defeated, in fact, stronger, paradoxically. The quiet librarian found her voice, her power, her claws sharpened by adversity. I started a blog, anonymized of course, under a clever pseudonym, sharing insights into spotting rare book forgeries, detailing sophisticated elder exploitation tactics, warning others about the dangers of gaslighting and financial abuse, using my research skills, my painful experience, for something good, empowering others, turning poison into antidote. The response has been overwhelming, validating. They tried to erase me, to silence me, to profit from my fabricated decline, steal my legacy, snuff out my life. Instead, they unleashed a force they never knew existed, a quiet woman's righteous fury, channeled into meticulous action. They wanted my legacy, my money, my life, my future. In the end, they lost everything: their freedom, their future, their reputation, their connection to the family I once cherished. Everything, reduced to cautionary tailies and prison numbers. And I reclaimed mine, not entirely unscathed. The phantom taste of poison lingers sometimes. The gaps on my shelves still hurt, but whole, resilient, and fiercely, undeniably, alive. My narrative, rewritten by me. Justice can be a cold dish, indeed, but sometimes, when you've been pushed to the brink, it's the only thing on the menu that truly satisfies, and I learned I was perfectly capable of serving it myself. Wow, just wow, take a moment with that. Clara's story, it's intense, isn't it? The depth of the familial betrayal, the calculated intimate cruelty, followed by such precise, intelligent, and devastating retribution. It's breathtaking in its scope, it's chilling, the methodical nature of the abuse, but also, strangely, fiercely empowering. Watching Clara turn the tables, using her own unique skills, that quiet strength, honed over decades among books and research, transforming into focused fury, then meticulous strategic action. It's extraordinary. She fought back, not with rage-fueled impulse, but with her mind, her knowledge, her librarian's precision. Her absolute refusal to be erased, to be a victim. Was her response too harsh? Orchestrating that public confrontation, ensuring their complete ruin? Or was it exactly what they deserved? The only language they understood, that line between justice and revenge, it can get so blurry, can't it? Especially when the wounds are deliberately inflicted, poisoned, personal. What do you think? I genuinely want to hear your thoughts on this one. Drop a comment below. Did Clara go too far in her pursuit of justice? Or was her response perfectly calibrated to the magnitude of their crimes? Where is the line? These situations, Clara's ordeal, they force us to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, family loyalty versus self-preservation, vulnerability in agging, and the extraordinary lengths we might go to protect ourselves, our identity, our legacy, when pushed to the absolute limit. Thank you, sincerely, for listening, for being part of this difficult but important conversation, sharing stories like Clara's. It matters. If Clara's story resonated with you, if it sparked something in you, please consider sharing it. Awareness is a powerful shield against the kind of insidious darkness she faced. You never know who might need to hear this. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, become part of this community, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next unforgettable story, because there are always more lines being crossed, more consequences unfolding. I'm Victoria. Thank you for your time. Be safe, be aware, look closely, and trust wisely. Until next time.